This camera is running, so you could start now.
Karsten?
Hi,
You are?
I'm Karsten. I live here in Berlin, and I run a research lab here that hacks stuff, and oftentimes that stuff is phone related. So we're continuing some of the work that you started, I guess.
And from 45 years ago, when I was doing the same thing, when the telephone system was using analog and using in-band signaling that occupies the same wire pair we talk on, making it possible to inject tones into long distance calls, not unlike this here. That is a big tandem stack. All these links together is allowing the connection to be very, very long, and it was set up by using the multi-frequency tones. Now in SS7, SS7 started as, from what I understand, SS7 became active in the mid-70s. Is that correct? 75, I think? Because I remember
Definitely older than me.
Yeah, because I can remember a lot of the trunks didn't respond to 2600, and then more and more trunks didn't respond to 2600. By about 1982, where there were probably maybe 5–10% of the trunks would respond to 2600. And at that point, the amount of trunks that was possible to MF from was so few that the phone company had no problem channeling them into a nice big fat filter that they could monitor. So it became, after about 1980, 81, it became very uncool to make blue box calls.
Right.
Now, when did SS7 open it up with? Now, SIGTRAN is, from what I understand, SIGTRAN is the TCP/IP interface to SS7.
Right. That didn't exist in the beginning. So at the beginning, SS7 was cables run between telcos, but eventually, of course, you would want to use existing cables, oftentimes internet connections, to run SS7. So that's now known as SIGTRAN.
Now, it's just nothing more than a port and an IP address with some software using standard port listening calls. I guess using the POSIX Unix commands to do this probably, but on a lower level, but probably you have higher level programs to do it. I saw one or two of the programs that were written in Python, which is pretty funny because I'm also a Python programmer. So you basically developed some programs that would basically connect to an IP address. I don't want to know what it is. Don't tell me.
Different ones anyway.
Different ones. And so how many IP addresses are out there right now? There's just so many of them, right? Are we talking hundreds? Are we talking just 10 or 15?
Hardly any IP addresses are out there that would just provide SIGTRAN access to anybody who connects. So there's a few, but those few are often found, abused, and then closed pretty quickly.
They're closed pretty quickly.
Right, because they are being abused so quickly, right? And you can abuse an open SS7 channel, for instance, for SMS spamming, like you would abuse an open email server.
How prevalent is that? Well, who are doing this?
I don't know. I don't receive much SMS spam in the networks that I use, but in other parts of the world, apparently this is a bigger problem. But typically, what the user would see is not perceived as spam. So a company like, let's say, Google sends out a lot of confirmation codes over SMS, and they always look for the least cost alternative. So if you hacked into SS7, you would be a very low cost alternative to more established, more legal providers. But then even a company like Google may solicit your services because they don't know how everything is routed either.
If I were to want my own SS7 access, what would I have to pay for it? What do they charge?
I think that highly depends on what you want to use it for. So if all you want to do is security measurements like we do, this comes really, really cheap. But if if you want to do something more illegal that would probably get them into trouble, you'd have to pay a premium. But we're talking hundreds to at most thousands of dollars. Nothing more than that.
Hundreds to thousands of dollars to get your own legitimate access to SS7. And what is that access? Just a IP address, port, and some software, basically?
Simply a VPN into some network that then gives you a SIGTRAN connection.
Oh, so you have a VPN in there, huh? And so it's just a really closed port and just very narrow. And now how do you, I know that when you're doing roaming, you can't close the border because of the roaming. Is that still a problem, or can that be mitigated by using an IPS, an intrusion prevention system? Like I did the Crunch box a long time ago. And when I did the Crunch box, we used Snort, and when Snort triggered an alert, then that alert would then activate through a very secure channel some procedure that would do something to the firewall.
I think the answer is a combination of both. Some of the messages in SS7 are just not meant to ever be exchanged between two different networks, so you can block them at the network boundary, and so you kill off that, let's say, half of the attack surface. The remaining half, though, you have to do some smarter filtering on. For instance, your subscribers will send or trigger messages from other countries to be sent into your network when those subscribers are in fact in those countries. But you can correlate, of course, where you last heard from the subscriber and then check whether there's any reasonable chance that subscriber has meanwhile moved into that country. And oftentimes that's the SS7 access that you do purchase is from certain areas of the world that do not necessarily attract much roaming. These are very small carriers in very small countries.
Like African countries.
Like African countries.
South American countries.
South American, but even smaller. Think countries.
What about North Korea?
Which is, I'm not sure if North Korea is connected to SS7, to be honest. But countries on the Pacific, countries that may just be a single island somewhere. Now, they may have some tourists there, but most people never go to those islands, so most traffic originating from there is probably fraudulent, right? So those things can pretty easily be filtered for.
I see. What about the USA? Are there any networks in the USA that are vulnerable?
The US is an interesting case. So the US has probably the most networks of any country. There's all these regional carriers that do have their own SS7 access. And
like how many are there?
Probably upwards of 50 different carriers who are official telcos, who have some number range, maybe in Wisconsin, maybe in Idaho, and who can then use that access for different business purposes, for instance, for roaming optimization for bigger telcos. But then also in the US, there's carriers that don't really connect to SS7 or do it through protocol translation, and the biggest examples are Verizon and Sprint. So they build on a different technology stack, so they have different exposure to these attacks.
Different exposure? How so? Like?
So most SS7 messages...
It still uses SIGTRAN, or does it use something different?
Well, it would receive SS7 messages, but then before actually processing the messages, it would translate them into a more limited protocol. And so a lot of the verbosity of SS7 is lost in the translation, and so a lot of the abuse potential is lost also. So Sprint and Verizon, they have to go way out of their way, for instance, to enable roaming. But because their roaming infrastructure is so complicated, those same messages that we use for attacks don't work there anymore. Right? So they interact with SS7 on a more limited basis, and as a lucky side effect of that limitation, they're less vulnerable to attacks. But of course, that leaves AT&T, T-Mobile, and many smaller carriers still being very wide open on SS7.
Is AT&T still wide open?
I haven't measured recently, to be honest, but if I can trust what Ted Leo, the congressperson, is finding out, nothing has happened.
That was that congressman you interviewed in LA, right? That did that demonstration.
The congressman that was interviewed by 60 Minutes, and
right, yeah,
who we spied on from Germany, right?
Right, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
So he was very outraged, not at us spying on him, but about the fact that that he didn't know about it, that his own spying agency, the NSA, had not warned that he himself could be the victim of spying, pretty easy spying.
The look on that guy's face from the IT or whichever company that was, a big cell phone, whatever it was, I don't know what it was. Can you explain that? The guy who was really, I mean, you should look at the blank and stare on his face. It was priceless.
The congressman?
Yeah, no, the other guy, the big official, the one that was head of the it's an organization for cell phone companies.
Well, it's a lobby organization that, of course, had to say we're doing everything to prevent this. This was illegitimate access. This will not really ever happen to us. Where, of course, at the same time, they can just look at their own data and see how much abuse is happening. But a company like AT&T, they cannot just switch on protection. AT&T is many different companies all wrapped into one brand name. So each of those single companies
It's like
would
the
have
old
to do
blue
something.
box days, because you had all these different tandems. You had White Plains 4A switching tandems.
Right.
You had number one crossbar switches in let's see, Ohio. The tandem stacking thing that I just showed you was through two Ohio stations, and they were number one crossbar. And number one crossbars are the ones that you can stack. For instance, if you send key pulse 042 start, then you go into the 042 interchange, which was a sub of an area code, then it would go chink, and it would just drop you right into the trunk. It's like stacking tandems. And you just add them, go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth until the quality of the connection was so bad with the noise that, you just can't get everything. I think what we did, I think the biggest one we did was like 25 or 30 trunks.
Okay, nice, yeah.
And what you heard there just earlier that I played was what that is. Anybody wants to hear that full tape can go to wideweb.com / phone trips, I think. And you can get all those tones from Doorbell. Doorbell was the guy who did most of those recordings back in 1975.
Right. Well, again, before I was even born.
Yeah. So do you have anything that you'd like to demonstrate?
Right here, right now, no. That
Okay.
takes a little bit more preparation, and especially it takes consent of everybody involved, right?
Right, exactly. And also, does it take any special hardware?
No. I mean, as I said, you dial into a VPN from a normal computer, and then you send over that VPN TCP/IP packets, SIGTRAN in this case, which then encapsulate SS7, which is all that hack that's needed. You need a little bit of preparation in mapping a target network, and especially the American networks, they're so large, it's a little bit of work to map them, but once you did that, everybody on those networks.
So when you're mapping them, you're basically using this P1 security app here called SCTP scan. Is that what you use to find them?
No, we don't. SCTP is yet a different layer in this SS7. What we do is we start sending messages to normal phone numbers. So the addressing in SS7 is phone numbers. So we know that, let's say your phone is on AT&T, so we start sending messages there. And what happens is your phone is not supposed to have an SS7 address. So we will get an error message from someone at AT&T saying, hey, you reached an invalid destination. But that error message will come from a legitimate address. So there we have the first address that we can start our mapping
So you
from.
get it to kind of tell you where everything is.
Yeah, and also there are published documents that you can find somewhere on the internet where they themselves have to, of course, publish how other telcos can reach them, right? So each telco has to tell every other telco what their exposure is, and of course that information often becomes public.
And it's all one big happy family, and they trust everybody. Well, sort of.
And
Once inside the network.
not more and not less than on the internet, you would think, right? Only, I guess most telcos haven't understood that yet, that the internet too is a network where many people can connect, and where you shouldn't blindly trust every packet flowing in, right? So the network itself should not be blamed for the insecurity. It is how you handle the inbound traffic, right? And on SS7, some have started rigorous filtering where we are completely out of ideas how to breach into those networks, but most networks have not done that yet, right?
So you would basically send a message to my phone and to the AT&T network, and it may or may not understand that message, but if it doesn't understand that message, it'll then send back some type of information back to you, and with that information, you can then dig deeper and find out what's going on.
Exactly, right?
I see.
No.
So you get it to kind of tell you what's going on, and there's no way you can prevent that, right?
Well, so again, taking the internet analogy, basically what we're doing is we're discovering the IP addresses that belong to a company. On the internet, that isn't supposed to be secret anyway, right? Everybody, in fact, wants you to know their IP addresses so you can connect to their web server, that you can send them emails. Only in SS7, because there's no inbound filtering in a lot of networks, that information by itself becomes half the attack, right? The other half then are simple Python scripts that would send packets, and that's it. No more ingredients needed to spy on somebody or to commit fraud.
So it sends packet, it sends it back, and much like the SANS document here, that for instance, location tracking here. I guess your name is on this document. I think. Actually, I remember seeing your name on here somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Who is Ingo, by the way?
Oh, Tobias Engel? Yeah,
Is he one of your associates?
No, well, he's another researcher also living in Berlin. Yeah, but so we developed these tools pretty much in parallel and with very similar results, which gives me confidence that if he came up with it, if we came up with it, that some criminal also came up with it, being less public about it.
This just lays it right out there. It just tells you exactly what goes on with the protocol. I mean, I understand this pretty well.
But yeah, well, some of the networks, of course, when we published our results 2 years ago, they criticized us for creating a problem. But if different research teams differently come across the same abuse potential, so did some other spy agency, so did some criminal, so did a bunch of other people. So I'm pretty sure that we were not the first people to figure this out. It's just too straightforward.
So when you want to set up the tracking of a cell phone, how long does that usually take to get everything set up to do that? Does it like take a couple of hours, half hour, or you got to go through that research that you were saying earlier?
It takes a couple of hours to map a network.
You have to map the network.
Yes. So to add
what's involved in that?
Well, what I described, right?
Okay.
You want to find out what addresses they are using,
Okay.
either from the documents that they publish themselves, or you just start scanning the address ranges. But once you did that, adding yet another person, that's a matter of seconds. So the increment per person is very little once you understand the network. And there may not be that many target networks you're interested in. So after a couple of days, maybe weeks of preparation, then you can start tracking hundreds and thousands of people if you wanted to.
Wow. That's amazing. God, what are they going to do about that?
Well,
what do you see in the future?
More filtering. So, what do we do about the evilness of the internet, right? We started filtering inbound traffic. Email servers don't accept blind emails for forwarding to other servers anymore, so the spam problem has gotten a lot better. Windows computers don't accept internet connections to the LAN protocols, so we don't have any self-spreading viruses anymore on Windows. So all of this is thanks to firewalls and thanks to understanding what traffic should reach your computer and what traffic should not. Now, in the case of SS7, that knowledge is out there, what should reach your boxes and what should not. Just very few people have realized that knowledge into product yet, and even fewer have deployed those products in the network.
And it's pretty easy to block it, right? Once you knew what to block, then you could block it pretty easy then, right?
Some messages are very straightforward, you just block them. Some other messages you got to do some plausibility checking on. So a lot of messages...
You're like roaming, for instance,
exactly.
Roaming an SMS
right?
messaging.
So, of course, it could be that I go to Australia, right? I mean, there's nothing holding me back from going to Australia. But if right now My German carrier receives a message from Australia claiming that they need some information about me. My German carrier should correlate that with the knowledge that just today, just now in fact, I'm in Germany. I can't be in those two places at the same time, and so those messages
So
need
if
to be
you
dropped.
check your recent locations, and if your recent location is within a certain respectable time difference, like if it's 17 hours, then it's pretty much given that you're in Australia, but if it's 10 minutes,
Right.
then you're still in Germany.
Yes, exactly. And also the ordering of messages matters. So when my phone switches off in Germany, it says goodbye, and if it switches on in Australia after a long flight, it says hello and authenticates to the network. All of this is recorded in the German network, and only after that it would make sense for tracking messages to reach the German network. If those tracking messages come in isolation without the right ordering of messages before, again, that makes no sense. But if you know anything about firewalls, this would now imply a stateful firewall, a firewall that remembers state about every single subscriber, and telcos are just very technology conservative,
Okay.
right? So they would not want to go all the way to stateful firewalls that could possibly break something, and they start with the simpler firewalls, where just the most abusive messages are stopped altogether, or the most abusive networks are stopped altogether.
Great, well, thank you. I think we're out of time on this video tape, is that right?
3 minutes.
Do you want to, okay, 2 more minutes. Any closing thoughts here?
In the context of especially us talking now, having five decades between your research and mine, I think it's pretty shocking that those very same companies, they keep reproducing the same level of trivially
That's exactly what I said to
technology,
myself.
right?
I said to myself, the telcos are doing the same thing they did before. They're doing their same old tricks. They're just trying to cut costs and make things so insecure. And it's just like the old days. They're just back to their old tricks again.
Yeah.
That's
And
amazing.
I think another thing that I would remark though is that the telco customers in those 5 decades where they were exploitable have not complained even once. It is rare that researchers complain, and it is rare that researchers are featured in the media, but it's always a very brief encounter with the media, and 99% of the time people are just happy with the phone network, even though they have been insecure, and probably will stay insecure until somebody starts complaining.
Now this application you have for the Android phone called Snoop something.
Snoop Snitch, yeah.
Snoop Snitch. When are we going to have a Snoop Snitch for our iPhones?
Well, Apple, for good reasons, locks away the data that we need for Snoop Snitch, right? So, in fact, we'd have to kind of spy on you to keep you safe, and that's possible on an Android phone because it gives us low-level access, not in an iPhone.
Somebody anonymously sent me, this was way back when the iPhone first came out, some API calls for the cellular network
Oh, nice.
that was not released.
Right.
And they were like header files and things like that, and the library files. But it was a long time ago, and it probably doesn't work anymore.
Yeah, well, on the first couple of iPhones this would have still worked, but the iPhone has gotten a lot more locked down, which for most people actually is good news.
That's great. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John.
Okay, that's good tape. Thanks.
Good.
Excellent.